when The Rock and John Cena collided at WrestleMania, when we witnessed the end of an era, when CM Punk was on a generational title run, when Brock Lesnar returned and The Shield debuted, when Chris Jericho introduced the flashy jacket, while Daniel Bryan lit the revolution on the Yes movement. And these are just some of the things that defined the wild year of 2012. When most people think of the greatest years in WWE, they think of the late 90s during the Attitude Era or the peak years of the Ruthless Aggression Era during the mid-2000s. However, WWE in 2012 might be the most underrated year in the company's history. Not only was the top of the card loaded with names like Punk, Cena, and Lesnar, but we also had strong mid-card acts, rising stars, and wild storylines that kept the product hot all year long. So what exactly made 2012 special? What were the matches, feuds, and moments that defined this year? And how does WWE in 2012 compare to the company today? Let's take a trip down memory lane and revisit the GOATed year of 2012. When you think of 2012, you think of WrestleMania 28. And when you think of WrestleMania 28, you think of John Cena versus The Rock, a battle of two generations, a dream match for the ages, and a year-long build. The match was made official on the Raw after WrestleMania 27, but the build truly picked up in the first quarter of 2012. Cena brought back his rapper persona for a night, while Rock brought out his guitar. Cena dissed Rock's tattoos, while the Great One threw Cena's merch into Boston Lake. Cena berated Rock for turning his back on the fans and leaving for Hollywood, while the Brahma Bull retaliated the way only he can and had the fans chanting his name. By the time WrestleMania 28 arrived in Miami, the match had been positioned as the biggest WrestleMania main event in ages. The whole world was watching. Most fans expected The Rock to pass the torch to Cena, but that's not what happened. The crowd was electric from the moment the bell rang, and Rock and Cena went back and forth, exchanging blows and finishers. In the final stretch, Cena got a little too confident, mocking The Rock's people's elbow, and the Great One countered with a rock bottom. When the dust settled, it was The Rock standing tall, while Cena sat on the ramp looking on in frustration. The torch stayed exactly where it was. Cena lost the narrative that had been built around him for an entire year, and spent the rest of 2012 looking for ways to prove himself, while the man who beat him was already gone, off to film another movie. But while Cena and Rock closed the show at WrestleMania, that same night, we also saw the end of an era. The Undertaker and Triple H had wrestled the year before at WrestleMania 27, but while the dead man won that match, it was the Game who walked out on his own 2 feet. That humiliation of having to be carried out after the match haunted Taker for a year, and he challenged Triple H for a rematch at WrestleMania 28. However, the Game declined the challenge, using his new executive role as an excuse. It wasn't until Taker invoked Triple H's best friend Shawn Michaels' name that the Game got provoked enough to accept the challenge. The match was made official for Mania inside Hell in a Cell, and standing in the middle of it as the special guest referee was Shawn Michaels. The same Shawn Michaels who had come within seconds of ending the streak himself 2 years earlier. The same Shawn Michaels who Triple H called his best friend. His presence elevated the tension and emotional stakes of the match to another level. Every count, every decision he made inside that cell carried history, loyalty, and doubt all at once. The build leaned hard into finality. This was sold as the third and last match between these two, the closing chapter of a rivalry that had spanned over a decade. Triple H talked about ending the streak as a mercy, not a triumph. The Undertaker talked about it as the one thing nobody could ever take from him. When WrestleMania arrived, it was time for war. Triple H made his grand entrance first. Then, The Undertaker arrived, taking off his hood and revealing a new look. While the two men stared each other down with Shawn Michaels looking on, the cell got lowered. Inside the cell, the two men beat each other down with everything they had. The moment everyone remembers came late, after Triple H connected with a pedigree following a sweet chin music, and for a few seconds, the entire world believed the streak was finally over. It was one of the most convincing false finishes the company had ever produced. But The Undertaker kicked out, found one more burst of strength, and put Triple H away to push the streak to 20-0. What made the moment hit even harder came after the bell. Triple H, Michaels, and Undertaker stood together on the stage, exhausted and embracing like men who had been through a war together. It felt like a goodbye. Many assumed this really was it for The Undertaker, that no future match could ever top what had just happened inside that cell. He would prove them wrong eventually, but in that moment, it felt like the closing of a legacy. But while that legacy was being celebrated on the grandest stage, a very different kind of story was unfolding around the WWE Championship. CM Punk entered 2012 already on top, carrying the WWE Championship into the new year as the voice of the voiceless. Going into WrestleMania 28, Punk was involved in a deeply personal feud with Chris Jericho, and the two had a solid match on the grandest stage of them all. Their rematch at Extreme Rules was even more brutal and marked the end of the rivalry. Punk had already defended the title against names like Alberto Del Rio, Dolph Ziggler, and Daniel Bryan. But by the time summer rolled around, Punk's reign felt overshadowed by stars like Cena and Rock, and the office kept treating him like an afterthought and a transitional champion. That frustration built for months, and the boiling point arrived at Raw 1000 in July, on a night already loaded with major moments. The Rock made his return that night too, making the save for John Cena after an attack by the Big Show. But just as The Rock turned around, CM Punk nailed him with a clothesline and then dropped him with a GTS. The whole thing worked perfectly because of its timing. Just moments earlier, The Rock had announced he would challenge for the WWE Championship at the Royal Rumble. Punk attacking him instantly framed the entire next 6 months as a fight for respect, not just gold. Punk stopped being the scrappy underdog the crowd rallied behind and became something colder, a champion who believed the system, and now even the fans owed him more credit than he was getting. He started using underhanded tactics, attacked Jerry Lawler, and did whatever it took to retain his title. Paul Heyman's addition as his advocate sharpened the character even further. Heyman gave Punk a mouthpiece who could frame every shady finish, every count-out, every disqualification as proof that the business itself was conspiring against the best in the world. It turned Punk's title defenses into must-see matches. He retained against John Cena and Big Show at SummerSlam. He got past Ryback at Hell in a Cell. He even fought Vince McMahon himself on an episode of Raw, and his quest for respect became the show's defining story. For the rest of the year, CM Punk remained the central character on Monday nights, defending the title multiple times and also putting out some of his best work on the mic. It was the longest reign WWE had built around a single performer in years, and it worked precisely because Punk never let the character feel stale. But while Punk was dominating as champion, a perfect storm had arrived on Raw earlier that year that changed the entire landscape of WWE. After losing to The Rock at WrestleMania 28, John Cena called out the Great One on Raw the next night, but was instead interrupted by Brock Lesnar. Here was a former WWE champion, a force of nature, and UFC heavyweight champion walking back into the company and going right after its top babyface. Lesnar was presented as an ultimate fighting machine, whose only goal was to inflict pain. During his first appearance itself, Lesnar laid Cena out with an F5, and the build to their match also saw a chaotic brawl that required the entire locker room to come out to separate the two stars. At Extreme Rules in April, Lesnar faced John Cena in a brutal match that delivered in the ring but undercut the Beast's momentum the moment Cena walked out the winner after striking Lesnar with a chain. Lesnar did not take the loss well, and the show's writers used that anger as the spark for something bigger. The next night on Raw, he turned his frustration toward Triple H, breaking his arm in a vicious attack that took the game off television and gave Lesnar an aura of danger. During Triple H's absence, Lesnar demanded to be presented as the top star on Monday nights, and Raw became Raw Super Show starring Brock Lesnar. The story built toward SummerSlam, where Lesnar and Triple H faced each other in a no-holds-barred match. For 18 minutes, the two men tore into each other with steel steps, sledgehammers, and years of bad blood until Lesnar locked in the Kimura lock and Triple H tapped out. Lesnar walked away from SummerSlam looking exactly like the unstoppable force WWE had promised when he first stepped back through the curtain. But 2012 wasn't only about titles and main event stars, because somewhere else on the roster, a spark was being lit that would engulf the entire wrestling world. Daniel Bryan's year began with heartbreak. He walked into WrestleMania 28 as World Heavyweight Champion and walked out without the title in 18 seconds, distracted by a kiss from his own on-screen girlfriend, AJ Lee. It was designed to make him look pathetic. Instead, it made the fans furious on his behalf, and that fury turned into something WWE never planned for. The following weeks on Raw and SmackDown, the crowd drowned out the entire show chanting yes over and over, regardless of what was happening in the ring. The chant should have faded within weeks, but it did not. It only kept growing louder. By the summer, Bryan was getting world title shots off the strength of crowd reaction alone, even while still playing a heel, because fans simply refused to boo him anymore. That same chant eventually became the soundtrack to one of the most unexpected partnerships of the year. After a WWE Championship feud versus CM Punk and a turbulent love triangle featuring Kane and AJ Lee, Bryan and Kane were paired together almost as a punishment in an anger management storyline nobody expected to matter. Kane had himself made his return towards the end of 2011 with a new mask and spent the first half of 2012 feuding against names like John Cena, Zack Ryder, and Randy Orton. The dynamic between Bryan, the whiny underdog, and Kane, the demonic monster, felt like bickering roommates forced to share an apartment. It should not have worked, but it did. Team Hell No became tag team champions by the fall, and one of the most entertaining acts on the entire roster simply because both men fully committed to the bit. Chris Jericho's return added another layer to the year's storytelling. Y2J made his return on the first episode of the year, entered the Royal Rumble match looking every bit ready to win the whole thing before fumbling at the final moment and getting eliminated by Sheamus. That near miss set up his WrestleMania program with Punk and reminded the roster what a veteran heel Jericho could still bring to a major show. The show also had its absurd storylines, like Team Johnny versus Team Teddy and the entire Cena versus John Laurinaitis program, which dragged on for way too long. Lord Tensai also arrived as a monster heel before being turned into a comedy jobber. The midcard was dominated by names like Cesaro, Rey Mysterio, Santino, Cody Rhodes, and The Miz, while guys like Sheamus, Alberto Del Rio, Jack Swagger, and The Big Show anchored the world title picture. The Miz in particular had an awesome intercontinental title reign that cemented him as one of the most reliable performers in the company. Cesaro, meanwhile, dominated as the US champion, racking up wins against Justin Gabriel, R-Truth, and Zack Ryder. The women's division revolved around names like Eve, Layla, and Caitlyn, and was treated more like an afterthought. Also, in a shocking turn of events, John Cena won the Raw Money in the Bank briefcase, while Dolph Ziggler won the SmackDown version. Cena decided to cash in his title shot at Raw 1000, a night that is widely considered as one of the best episodes in the show's history. We got a DX reunion, the return of The Undertaker, multiple legends returning to destroy Heath Slater, and memorable moments that paid tribute to the show's long history. But nothing reshaped the entire power structure of the show like the wedding segment between AJ Lee and Daniel Bryan, putting one of the most chaotic characters on the roster directly in charge of the brand. Towards the end of the year, AJ would get involved in a controversial storyline with John Cena, but turn heel, aligning with Dolph Ziggler after costing Cena his match versus Ziggler at TLC. However, nothing from the back half of the year mattered more than what happened at Survivor Series in November. As Ryback closed in on reigning champion CM Punk, three men nobody recognized came through the crowd in tactical attire and triple powerbombed him through the announce table. Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns. The Shield had arrived, and nobody yet knew whose side they were on. In the coming weeks, they answered that question themselves, declaring themselves judge, jury, and executioner for the entire roster. The Shield had an impressive showing at TLC 2012, embarking on an unstoppable winning streak that had defined the next chapter of WWE. Reigns was the powerhouse, Ambrose was the unhinged risk-taker, and Rollins was the strategic architect, and together, the trio became one of the hottest acts in the months that followed. WWE entered 2012 riding on the momentum and star power of its established legends and finished the year with its next generation of stars. Daniel Bryan, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose would go on to become major players who defined the next era of wrestling. And if you want to relive all the madness of the modern era of WWE in its entirety, check out this video next.